Welcome to LC Screen Talk. My name is Larry, and this is my top 10 worst movies of 2019. Yeah, it's that time of year yet again. We're here, we're at the end of the year, and it's time to discuss all of the great things about cinema. But it's also time to shine one last spotlight on those films that made me die just a little bit inside throughout 2019. So before we jump into the countdown, a reminder, this is my personal list. I didn't see every film that came out this year, but I did see a whole lot of them, and unfortunately, that meant I saw a whole lot of bad films. But this is just my personal list. These are the films I didn't enjoy and deemed to be the least enjoyable experiences for me. I'm sure your list will vary, will look different, and I can't wait to see which films you're ready to forget down in the comment section below. So without further ado, let's get this thing started. Kicking us off at the 10th worst film of the year. On the surface, Countdown is such a generic jump scare fest, but when you dive deeper, it is so much worse than that. Starting with the fact that there was potential here. This could have been a fun kind of update for a new generation on films such as The Ring or Final Destination. Pretty much immediately upon watching this film, you realize there's nowhere nearly as good as those. The acting is okay at best and absolutely horrible at worst. Our characters are absolutely ridiculous and make the dumbest decisions, one right after the other, to move this plot along. And we start off with what could be this fun kind of little new age app concept. It quickly devolves into this spiritual generic mess. Countdown is void of any sort of logic, it is void of any sort of scares, and left me just angry, quite frankly, that this was the only horror film that we got for the Halloween season this year. Ugh, I was just counting down the minutes until this movie was over. So here we are, number 9. I have Black Christmas, yet another horror film. It's an unfortunate reality of being a horror film fan. A few of them end up showing up on this worst list every year. But Black Christmas was such a crushing blow for me. It was directed by a woman, written by women, starring women, and was supposed to have this pretty awesome, like, badass women empowerment message and vibe to it. Well, it tried and failed spectacularly. First off, this is classified as a slasher, yet it has no slashing. I mean, there's hardly even a slasher villain in here, and we don't see any sort of kills or any sort of horror-esque elements. I mean, it's not a horror, honestly. It's a shrieky preach session that has even my SJW self rolling my eyes and screaming, "We got it, we get it already," by like midway through the movie. Black Christmas had absolutely zero subtlety to it. It grabs that female empowerment messaging, lifts it, and just repeatedly bangs you over the head with it in the worst ways possible. This is exactly how you do messaging completely wrong. No matter what it is you're trying to convey, watch Black Christmas and don't do that. The cinematography is ugly, the score is terrible, the acting mostly is garbage, and our characters are ridiculous. And to boot it all off, we're supposed to be in this big female empowerment horror film. We don't even get like badass women by the end. I was waiting and waiting and waiting for like a Ready or Not, You're Next, or Assassination Nation moment to happen, and I was left with just more horrible dialogue. Black Christmas was a letdown and really a piss poor excuse for a slasher. 47 Meters Down, Uncaged was the sequel that we didn't ask for, and after watching it, we definitely didn't want. This wasn't even really a sequel. It had sharks in it, and that's the only way they tied this into the first film, because there's no other commonality. Talk about terrible acting in a thriller, in a horror film. Wow, the acting here is terrible. And our two established actors are given literally nothing to do. All of these characters are so insistently stupid that it's hard to even like sit in here and watch it and care. Then we get these really poorly rendered sharks that have these really awkward designs. Characters yelling and screaming under the water non-stop as they're supposed to be like saving air a little bit, maybe. There are no thrills, there are no chills. There's pretty much nearly nothing redeeming about this movie. It gets so over the top and insane in that third act that maybe there's some fun to be had there, but literally everything else in this movie is just chum. The problem is, I don't even know that sharks would want to eat this chum, so that's 47 meters down, Uncaged. The best thing about this film is that it gave me an excuse to wear this pretty cool shirt again. And honestly, the promotional images for Hellboy were the best thing that this movie produced. Otherwise, garbage. This movie looked terrible from the trailers and then proved to be even worse than anticipated when I watched the film. The acting in here is okay, and our lead actors are what prop this up even in the slightest. The CGI in this movie is absolutely dreadful. We get characters with these weird floating, like, decapitated head things that provide Cap with running competition on the most nightmare inducing CGI of 2019, and for all the wrong reasons. The plot is just so much, so nonsensical, so ridiculous. You don't care about any of these characters. The action is so poorly edited that you could never tell what's going on. The cinematography is just so bland and gross. The humor in this, please. And I just have to loop it back around to that CGI because it is so terrible. Everything that is not a practical effect in this movie is competition for the worst effects I've seen in anything in 2019. It's that bad. Just makes you long for the days for that third Guillermo del Toro Hellboy film. Instead, we're forsaken with this. Now we really start kicking off the terrible comedies that 2019 had to offer, and The Hustle was pretty flippin' terrible. At least it looked good. It was shot well overall, and that was about it. Rebel Wilson provided a chuckle here, chuckle there with her situational comedy, but wow, this was a misguided remake if I've seen one. These characters are so completely unlikable across the board. The jokes land with a hard thud over and over and over again. The plot is complete foolery and quite offensive, honestly. Anne Hathaway, what the hell were you doing? Oh my gosh, Anne Hathaway is so bad. She is so bad, and that accent made me want to die in the theater. It was just that terrible. This movie was like an affront on my brain cells, and I was ready to just hustle the hell up on out of that movie theater to get away from this mess. Woo! The first terrible movie I saw in 2019. What was this? Replicas provided me with that bottom of the barrel type of AI film I wish I had never seen. Keanu Reeves and the rest of the cast are all absolutely terrible, particularly that wife and her acting. Woo, it was bad. But even Reeves himself seemed to be pretty much sleepwalking through this film. The visual effects on this one, also pretty terrible. And the messaging, that's the big problem here, is you have this sci-fi artificial intelligence movie that tries to say something but then recants on its own message to prove the opposite by the end of the movie. I don't know. I don't understand, and clearly the screenwriters didn't understand what they were trying to say either. It is a ripoff of all the other artificial intelligence movies we've ever seen, just with less logic, worse CGI, and a whole lot less entertainment value. Replicas was accurate, it just replicated a formula that was executed far better millions of times before. I hate this trend that an animated film has to make this list every year. I know some people don't put animation on their list because they give it a pass. I don't give it a pass here. I'm sorry. I don't care what age your demographic is. If you deliver garbage to the screen, you'll make the list. It just is what it is. And Arctic Dogs was garbage. Maybe more so than the other films beneath it. This movie just left me numb. I just wasn't feeling. And that is such a disappointment because there is no effort, there's no imagination, there's no thought, there's no care put into crafting Arctic Dogs, and you can see it just plastered all over the screen. John Cleese was like the lone positive note for me in this film. The animation is beneath subpar with zero texture, and a couple of cute faced animals can't save that. The voice acting outside of Cleese is clearly a case of sleepwalking for all of these accomplished people that they somehow mangled into doing this. And the messaging is contrived to say the least, but it leads to a very, very strange global warming message in the end. The plot is nonsense. The characters are all pretty much unlikable, and at the very best, you don't care about them. Can't really remember any of their names, to be honest. The jokes are juvenile, they never land. I don't even think a single joke in the film lands. And the story is so cookie cutter, copy and paste, that you're hard pressed to distinguish this from about a million other films. This is executive team movie making at its worst, and that is why it's all the way up at number 4. Alexandra Shipp, we need to find you a new agent, girl. This is even worse than I had anticipated going into the film. I was hoping for something kind of fun, kind of funny, and I love Alexandra Shipp, so yay. No, not yay, not even in the slightest. This was garbage. An offensively unfunny film that takes the worst common denominator every single chance it gets. Instead of going for anything with any sort of thought, it grabs for the pot of humor. It just grabs for the trash can, straight up. The concept is flawed and ridiculous right from the get-go. There is no good messaging to be had by the end of it. It took about all the power I had to not just pull out my own phone in the middle of the theater. Jexy was an unfunny, uninventive, hot mess of a film. Point blank, period. Oh, just missing out on the worst film I saw in 2019 after held the spot for actually quite some time. The preteen version of 50 Shades of Grey is far worse than any of that trilogy managed to be. First off, our two lead actors are terrible. Actually, all of the acting, including from Selma Blair, girl, what you doing, is terrible in this film. I mean, all of the acting is piss poor. And the problem, our two leads have absolutely zero chemistry. You get major stalker vibes. You get all those abusive relationship warning signals in this collegiate experience. I was offended watching this mess. The directing is horrific. The editing is terrible. Cinematography is just bad. The music used is a mess. I literally cannot think of a redeeming factor when it comes to After. Whether you like teen romances or not, I think you'd be hard pressed to find positive when you watch this movie. It is that terrible. Yet, it still came in at the runner-up position. But before we talk about the absolute worst movie I saw in 2019, let's go ahead and talk about a few dishonorable mentions. Serenity was another early year contender for this list, with an okay performance from Matthew McConaughey that lifts it just above the worst. This movie thinks it is so smart while delivering absolutely nothing in terms of plot. It's saved by the fact that the plot itself is one of the most contrived and outrageous things I saw in 2019. It had a little bit of watchability to it. Otherwise, yeah, Serenity was not so serene. Matthew McConaughey strikes again with Beach Bums, a film that I found completely and totally morally repugnant. Our characters are more than just unlikable, they're terrible. The movie is completely unfunny to me and provides quite literally no type of message, no type of redemption for anybody here. It is an offensive, terrible film, and I don't understand why people love it as much as they do. Playmobil the movie is the other animated film that was in contention for this year's ranking because it is quite literally the really, really, really terrible ripoff of the Lego movie. Completely made as a commercial with no heart or soul to it, that for some reason is a musical without a memorable song to be heard. The Intruders barely missed out on this list thanks only to the over-the-top ridiculous nature of Dennis Quaid's performance, which provides some entertainment value to the film. Otherwise, this was trash. Horribly directed, poorly shot, weirdly edited, and without a thrill or ounce of sense to be seen. And my final dishonorable mention is the newly released Cats, or as it should be rebranded, Introductions, the movie, featuring titillating kitty cat seduction and death served up as a grand prize to strive for. The CGI was hauntingly horrible, with really just strange concepts, a nonsensical plot that I didn't care even the slightest about. Really, the only reason it meowed its way out of being in my worst 10 of the year was that it did provide us with Jennifer Hudson's amazing rendition of Memory. And now, my number one, the absolute worst film I saw in 2019. Fred Durst, don't you ever, get into your head thinking you can direct another film. You hear me? Sure, there is so much to laugh at in this film. It is so wretched that it has entertainment value to it, but I can't forgive it for that. Other people might find it so entertaining that they won't put it as their worst of the year. That's not the case here because I found it absolutely offensive and vile, if I'm being honest. The depiction of mental illness in this film, the depiction of disability at large and in general, is not only tone deaf, but literally offensive to the point that it made me so uncomfortable watching this film. Not for the contents or for what the characters were actually doing. It made me uncomfortable watching such a malicious, horribly misguided representation of mental illness. Not to mention a really horrible and offensive representation of fandoms, of fans at large, and of celebrities themselves. It is just terrible across the board. The script is the worst script that came out of 2019, with some of the most cringeworthy lines. Fred Durst, you really did this. You really had your characters put on Limp Frickin' Biscuit, talking about how great it is with this little kid. I mean, I guess another decade, another John Travolta film that competes for the worst of the entire 10-year span, because here we are yet again with you, Travolta. What the hell? Why did you sign up for this? It's just terrible. Script, terrible. Directing, terrible. Acting, terrible. Messaging, absolutely repugnant and some of the most offensive material I've seen in 2019. Just as a film watcher, just as a movie fan, this is literally an offense to all of us. That this got distributed in any form. Are you kidding me? So that's it. Those are my top 10 worst movies of 2019. What did you think of my list? Do you agree? Do you disagree? More importantly, what are your picks for the worst films you saw in 2019? Let me know either in the comment section down below, or you can hit me up on Twitter. If you liked this video, make sure to hit that like button down below as well, and subscribe to the channel so you are always up to date on my latest videos. I love you all so much for your continued support. Mwah! Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!